Before we dive into the dramatic tale of Amelia and Karen, a story of property lines, legal battles, and neighborly disputes, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on this and other compelling narratives. Now let's get started. The crisp morning air, usually a source of comfort for Amelia, felt heavy with a sense of foreboding. She stood at the edge of her property, the dew-kissed grass cool beneath her bare feet, her gaze fixed on the garish structure that dominated the landscape, Karen van der Lin's newly erected villa. It wasn't the architectural style, a bizarre fusion of Tuscan and McMansion aesthetics, that bothered Amelia so much, though the faux marble columns and the ridiculously oversized fountain certainly grated on her nerves. No, it was the placement of the house that sent a shiver of unease down her spine. A nagging suspicion, a feeling that something was amiss, had been growing in Amelia's mind for weeks, ever since Karen's construction project had begun. She tried to ignore it, telling herself she was just being overly sensitive, but the feeling persisted, a constant low-level hum of anxiety. And now, standing there, the truth as stark and unforgiving as a midday sun, was about to be revealed. Amelia had commissioned a new survey, a preemptive measure, she told herself, just to be sure. Her property line bordered Karen's, and over the years, subtle encroachments, a misplaced flower bed here, a slightly extended patio there, had created a sense of unease. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, treated neighborhood rules with a casual disregard that bordered on contempt. She was a whirlwind of entitlement and audacity, a woman who seemed to thrive on bending the rules to her advantage. Amelia, a quiet, reserved woman who valued her privacy and her meticulously tended herb garden, was Karen's polar opposite. The surveyor, a young man named Ben, arrived promptly, his equipment gleaming in the morning light. He set to work, carefully marking points along the supposed property line. Amelia watched, her stomach twisting into knots. She'd always suspected the boundary was a little off, but she'd never imagined the extent of the problem. As Ben moved further along the line, his expression grew increasingly puzzled. He paused, checked his readings, then checked them again. He muttered something about possible errors, but his furrowed brow betrayed his concern. Finally he turned to Amelia, his face pale. "Ma'am," he said, his voice hesitant, "I think you need to see this." He pointed to a spot a good 15 feet inside what Amelia thought was her property. 15 feet. The words echoed in her mind, a jarring dissonance against the backdrop of her peaceful garden. Ben explained that according to the official records, Karen's house, that monstrosity of questionable taste, encroached significantly onto her land. Amelia felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence of her surroundings. How could this be happening? She'd been so absorbed in her own world, her pottery studio, her herbs, her quiet life, that she'd failed to notice the creeping encroachment, the slow but deliberate theft of her land. She'd seen the construction, of course. She'd even grumbled to herself about the noise and the constant stream of trucks. But she'd never suspected this. She'd simply assumed the builders knew what they were doing, that they had the proper permits, that they were respecting property lines. It had never occurred to her that Karen, in her boundless arrogance, would dare to build her dream house on Amelia's land. The implications were staggering. The thought of legal battles, of angry confrontations, of the potential loss of a significant portion of her property, sent a chill down her spine. She remembered the stories she'd heard about Karen, how she'd bullied other neighbors into submission, how she'd manipulated the HOA to get her way. One particularly vivid story involved a dispute over a tree, where Karen had reportedly used some obscure bylaw to force a family to remove a beloved oak that had stood on their property for generations. Amelia knew this wouldn't be easy. Karen wouldn't just apologize and tear down half her house. Amelia's mind raced, trying to grasp the situation. She thought of her grandmother, who had left her this property, a small but precious piece of land that represented stability and security. The thought of losing it, of Karen's house looming over her, a constant reminder of the violation, made her blood boil. She felt a surge of anger, a fierce protectiveness over her land, her heritage, her peace of mind. She called her best friend, Sarah, a lawyer with a sharp mind and a compassionate heart. Sarah listened patiently as Amelia recounted the story, her voice trembling slightly. Sarah, ever practical, advised Amelia to gather all her documentation, the original property deed, any surveys she had, any correspondence with the HOA. She scheduled a meeting with Amelia for the following day. "Don't worry, Amelia," Sarah said, her voice reassuring, "we'll figure this out." But Amelia was worried. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, pacing the boundary line, the encroaching house a constant, looming presence. She tried to focus on her pottery, on the feel of the cool clay in her hands, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Karen, to the injustice of the situation. The sun seemed to cast long, accusatory shadows, making the situation feel even more surreal. She couldn't shake the feeling of violation, the sense that Karen had not just built a house, but had trespassed on her peace of mind, her sense of security. That night, Amelia barely slept. Her dreams were filled with images of bulldozers, legal documents, and Karen's smug face. She woke up several times, her heart pounding, the weight of the situation pressing down on her like a physical burden. She knew one thing for certain: this was going to be a long and difficult fight. She just didn't yet know how long or how difficult it would be. And she certainly didn't foresee the twists and turns that lay ahead, the depths of Karen's vindictiveness, and the unexpected allies she would find along the way. The meeting with Sarah the following day was a whirlwind of legal jargon and strategic planning. Amelia, armed with her meticulously organized documents, the original property deed, old surveys, even photographs of the subtle encroachments over the years, felt a flicker of hope amidst the gnawing anxiety. Sarah, a seasoned lawyer with a reputation for tenacity, listened intently, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the paperwork. She confirmed Amelia's worst fears. Karen's house indeed encroached significantly onto her property. The legal description was clear, the survey unambiguous. Karen had built her dream house, or at least a substantial portion of it, on land that belonged to Amelia. The audacity of it all. It was like a punch to the gut, a violation that left Amelia feeling both furious and vulnerable. Sarah explained the legal options available to Amelia, ranging from a quiet negotiation with Karen, which Sarah deemed unlikely to succeed given Karen's personality, to a full-blown legal battle. She outlined the potential costs, the time commitment, and the emotional toll such a lawsuit would take. Amelia listened, her mind reeling. The thought of a protracted legal fight with Karen, a woman known for her ruthlessness and her deep pockets, was daunting. But the thought of letting Karen get away with it, of allowing her to steal a piece of her property, was even more unbearable. "I want to fight," Amelia declared, her voice firm despite the tremor of fear that ran through her. "This is my land. It's not just about the property, it's about principle. I can't let her get away with this." Sarah nodded, a look of grim determination in her eyes. "Then we fight," she said. "But we fight smart. We need to be prepared for anything." The first step was to send Karen a formal letter, notifying her of the encroachment and demanding that she rectify the situation. Sarah drafted the letter, a carefully worded document that outlined the legal basis of Amelia's claim and the potential consequences of Karen's actions. The letter was delivered by certified mail, a formality that underscored the seriousness of the situation. Amelia waited, her anxiety growing with each passing day. She imagined Karen's reaction to the letter, the sputtering rage, the indignant denials. She pictured Karen red-faced and furious, plotting her revenge. True to form, Karen didn't take the news well. Instead of acknowledging the encroachment and offering to negotiate, she responded with a barrage of accusations and threats. She claimed that the survey was faulty, that Amelia was trying to extort her, that she would fight this tooth and nail. She even hinted at legal action against Amelia for harassment. Amelia, though shaken by Karen's aggressive response, refused to back down. She knew that Karen was trying to intimidate her, to bully her into submission. But Amelia, fueled by a righteous anger, was determined to see this through. The legal battle began in earnest. Sarah filed a lawsuit against Karen, seeking an injunction to stop further construction and demanding the removal of the encroaching portion of the house. Karen in turn hired a high-powered lawyer, a shark named Richard Harding, known for his aggressive tactics and his ability to win even the most difficult cases. The legal proceedings were long and arduous, a seemingly endless back and forth of motions, depositions, and court hearings. Amelia found herself immersed in a world of legal jargon, of property descriptions and boundary disputes, a world that was as foreign to her as it was frustrating. The financial burden of the lawsuit weighed heavily on Amelia. Legal fees mounted, and she found herself having to dip into her savings, money she had set aside for her pottery studio expansion. The stress of the legal battle began to take its toll. She lost sleep, her appetite waned, and she found it difficult to concentrate on her work. The once peaceful sanctuary of her garden, her refuge from the world, now felt tainted, overshadowed by the looming presence of Karen's encroaching house. But Amelia was not alone in this fight. She found unexpected allies in her neighbors, people who had also been victims of Karen's bullying and manipulation. They rallied around Amelia, offering their support, sharing stories of their own encounters with Karen, and even contributing to a legal defense fund. Among them was old Mr. Johnson, who lived across the street, a quiet, unassuming man who had witnessed Karen's tactics for years. He told Amelia stories of Karen's previous transgressions, how she'd manipulated the HOA rules to her advantage, how she'd intimidated anyone who dared to challenge her. He even revealed that Karen had tried to buy his property a few years back, offering him a ridiculously low price, a clear attempt to take advantage of his age and his declining health. Mr. Johnson's stories, while disturbing, gave Amelia a sense of validation. She realized that she wasn't the only one who had suffered at Karen's hands. Another unexpected ally was Ben, the surveyor. He had initially been hesitant to get involved, fearing repercussions from Karen and her powerful lawyer. But after witnessing Karen's aggressive response to the lawsuit, he decided to come forward. He testified about the accuracy of his survey, debunking Karen's claims that it was faulty. His testimony was crucial to Amelia's case, providing concrete evidence of the encroachment. Despite the support she received, Amelia felt the weight of the legal battle pressing down on her. There were times when she felt like giving up, when the stress and the financial strain seemed too much to bear. But then she would think of her grandmother, who had instilled in her a strong sense of justice and a belief in the importance of standing up for what's right. And she would think of her neighbors who were counting on her to fight for them, to stand up to Karen's tyranny. And she would find the strength to keep going. The trial was a spectacle, a dramatic clash of personalities and legal maneuvering. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Amelia and Karen faced each other, their animosity palpable. Amelia, though nervous, stood tall, her quiet strength a stark contrast to Karen's flamboyant arrogance. Richard Harding, Karen's lawyer, wasted no time in launching his attack. He painted Amelia as a greedy, vindictive woman, obsessed with money and determined to harass his client. He questioned the validity of the survey, accusing Ben, the surveyor, of incompetence and bias. He even tried to dig up dirt on Amelia, insinuating that she had a history of disputes with her neighbors. Sarah, however, was prepared. She countered Harding's accusations with calm, reasoned arguments, presenting irrefutable evidence of the encroachment. She called Ben back to the stand, where he expertly defended his survey, explaining the methodology he used and the accuracy of his measurements. She also presented the original property deed, which clearly showed the boundary line and Karen's transgression. She even called Mr. Johnson to the stand, who, despite his initial reluctance, bravely recounted his experiences with Karen, revealing her pattern of manipulative behavior. His testimony, though not directly related to the property dispute, painted a picture of Karen's character, highlighting her tendency to disregard rules and boundaries. The trial dragged on for days, each day filled with its own twists and turns. Amelia found herself on an emotional roller coaster, her hopes rising and falling with each piece of evidence presented, each argument made. She listened intently to the legal jargon, trying to understand the intricacies of the case, the subtle nuances of property law. She watched as Sarah and Harding battled it out in the courtroom, their words sharp and pointed, their legal strategies complex and often confusing. One particularly dramatic moment occurred when Harding produced a new survey, one that contradicted Ben's findings. This survey, he claimed, proved that Karen's house did not encroach on Amelia's property. Amelia felt a wave of despair wash over her. Had she been wrong all along? Had she wasted all this time, all this money on a lost cause? Sarah, however, was not fazed. She meticulously examined the new survey, pointing out inconsistencies and flaws in its methodology. She questioned the qualifications of the surveyor who had conducted it, revealing that he had a history of disciplinary actions and was known for his willingness to bend the rules for his clients. She even presented evidence that Karen had paid the surveyor an exorbitant fee, suggesting that he had been bribed to produce a favorable result. The judge, a stern but fair man named Judge Thompson, listened carefully to the arguments and examined the evidence. He seemed particularly interested in the discrepancies between the two surveys. He questioned both surveyors extensively, probing their methods and their findings. Finally, he announced that he would order an independent survey, conducted by a court-appointed expert. This was a major turning point in the trial. The independent survey would provide definitive evidence of the boundary line, settling the dispute once and for all. The wait for the results of the independent survey was agonizing. Amelia spent the time in a state of nervous anticipation, her mind filled with doubts and fears. She tried to focus on her pottery, but her hands trembled and she couldn't concentrate. She found herself constantly checking her phone, hoping for news from Sarah. Finally, The day arrived when Judge Thompson announced that the independent survey had been completed. The courtroom was packed, the atmosphere thick with tension. Judge Thompson read the results of the survey, his voice clear and resonant. The independent survey confirmed Ben's original findings. Karen's house, a substantial portion of it, encroached on Amelia's property. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Amelia felt a wave of relief wash over her, so intense that she almost wept. She had been right all along. Karen had stolen her land. Karen, on the other hand, looked stunned, her face pale and drawn. Richard Harding, her lawyer, looked equally surprised, his carefully constructed defense crumbling before his eyes. Judge Thompson then delivered his verdict. He ruled in favor of Amelia, ordering Karen to remove the encroaching portion of her house within a specified timeframe. He also ordered Karen to pay Amelia's legal fees and the costs of the independent survey. Amelia had won. Justice had prevailed. But the victory was bittersweet. The legal battle had taken a heavy toll on Amelia, both financially and emotionally. She had spent a significant portion of her savings, and she was exhausted from the stress and the constant worry. She knew that the removal of the encroaching portion of Karen's house would be a long and complicated process, and she braced herself for further conflict. She also knew that Karen wouldn't give up easily. She was already hearing rumors that Karen was planning to appeal the judge's decision. The fight, it seemed, was not over yet. The aftermath of the trial was a whirlwind of activity. Karen, true to her nature, initially refused to comply with the court order. She filed an appeal, claiming that the judge was biased and that the independent survey was flawed. Her appeal, however, was quickly dismissed. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her arguments lacked merit. Faced with the prospect of further legal action and mounting fines, Karen finally relented. The removal of the encroaching portion of Karen's house was a spectacle in itself. A team of demolition experts descended upon the property, their heavy machinery a stark contrast to the manicured lawns and the faux Tuscan facade. The sound of jackhammers and bulldozers filled the air, a symphony of destruction that echoed through the neighborhood. Neighbors gathered to watch, their faces a mixture of curiosity and satisfaction. Amelia, however, stayed away. She couldn't bear to witness the dismantling of Karen's dream house, even though it was a necessary consequence of her actions. The reconstruction process was long and arduous. The demolished portion of Karen's house had to be rebuilt, this time within the confines of her own property. The once grand facade was now marred by a noticeable gap, a permanent reminder of Karen's transgression. The oversized fountain, a symbol of Karen's extravagance, was removed, leaving a gaping hole in the manicured lawn. The faux marble columns, once a source of pride for Karen, now stood awkwardly askew, their grandeur diminished. The financial burden of the reconstruction fell squarely on Karen's shoulders. The legal fees, the demolition costs, the reconstruction expenses, it all added up to a substantial sum. Karen, used to a life of luxury and privilege, found herself facing financial hardship for the first time in her life. Her social standing plummeted, her reputation tarnished by the scandal. The HOA, once under her thumb, now distanced themselves from her, their patience worn thin by her constant rule-breaking and her disregard for their authority. Amelia, on the other hand, emerged from the ordeal stronger and more resilient than ever. The legal battle had tested her limits, but it had also revealed her inner strength. She had faced her fears, stood up for her rights, and prevailed against a formidable opponent. The support she received from her neighbors, the unexpected allies she found along the way, had reinforced her belief in the power of community and the importance of standing together against injustice. With the legal battle behind her, Amelia turned her attention to rebuilding her own life. She used the compensation she received from Karen to expand her pottery studio, creating a space where she could pursue her passion and share her creativity with others. She also invested in her garden, transforming it into a haven of peace and tranquility, a place where she could escape the stresses of the world and reconnect with nature. The experience had changed Amelia in profound ways. She was no longer the quiet, reserved woman she once was. She had found her voice, her confidence, her sense of purpose. She became more involved in her community, attending HOA meetings, advocating for her neighbors, and ensuring that the rules were applied fairly and equitably. She even ran for a position on the HOA board, winning by a landslide. Her victory was a testament to her newfound leadership and the respect she had earned from her community. The story of Amelia and Karen became a local legend, a cautionary tale about the dangers of entitlement and the importance of respecting boundaries. Karen, once the queen of the HOA, became a pariah, a symbol of arrogance and greed. Her dream house, a monument to her extravagance, now stood as a reminder of her downfall. Amelia, on the other hand, became a local hero, a symbol of resilience and courage. Her victory over Karen inspired others to stand up for their rights, to challenge injustice, and to believe in the power of community. Her story was a reminder that even the most formidable opponent can be defeated with determination, perseverance, and the support of those around you. In the end, Amelia found peace. She had reclaimed her land, her sense of security, and her belief in justice. She had also gained something even more valuable: the respect and admiration of her community. Her story was a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity, to find strength in unexpected places, and to emerge from even the most difficult challenges with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper appreciation for the simple joys of life. The sun shone brightly on her garden, her pottery studio hummed with activity, and the laughter of children filled the air. Life, once disrupted by conflict, had returned to a state of harmony, a testament to the enduring power of truth and the resilience of the human spirit. And that's the story of Amelia and Karen. A story of boundaries, battles, and ultimately a hard-won peace. If you enjoyed this tale of neighborly disputes and legal showdowns, and you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next story.